So welcome again, everyone. May 2nd already, 2024. We have a presentation on the work being done to update the BPA custom project M&V Protocols. I am Todd Amundsen. I'll introduce myself. Been at Bonneville Power for over 22 years. Much of that's been as a customer service engineer for mostly the West Side utility customers of BPAs. I do manage the BPA M&V protocols and guidelines. One engineer on a large team doing that, and as part of the design and administration of the Energy Smart Industrial program, going on 15 years strong. My current title is the Industrial Engineer Technical Lead. So this is kind of an overview for those of you following along. We've kind of revised and created this kind of structure here of the BPA custom project protocols and kind of broken that out into two columns. The custom project resources includes the custom project cost documentation guide. That was completed late last year. There was a webinar that's recorded and on the bpa.gov energy efficiency website, and future documents will be determined. Always welcome your thoughts and feedback on what else is needed in that. But what we're here today for is the BPA measurement verification resources, which going down this hierarchy begins with the M&V selection guide, which then goes down to the comprehensive M&V protocols, engineering calculations with verification. We have application guides and M&V reference guides. And this work certainly was a time in the making, several months, and we really welcome participants today having a chance to review these, and we'll talk more about that later. But yeah, that cost documentation guide that came out late last year defines project costs that are eligible for incentives, defines details supporting documentation requirements, really adds a lot of content that wasn't available previously in the BPA implementation manual, and that is available at this link shown at the bottom of the screen. It's a real colorful and well-designed cover page and content within. Next slide, please. This team that was focused on that, as well as the M&V protocol updates, my manager, Aaron Hope, certainly gave us guidance and directed me to manage the project from the Bonneville side. We're fortunate to have Facility Energy Solutions as the project manager, which includes Leah Webster, shown here, and SBW Consulting with Santiago Rodriguez Anderson, also on the call, and Ann Joyner, also on the call too. Facility Energy Solutions, if you're not familiar, is a small utility consulting firm specializing in measurement verification and retro commissioning. Joined by, as mentioned earlier, SBW Consulting and Stillwater Energy. They are evaluation and strategic energy management program experts, respectively, on this endeavor. And now we'll hear from Leah Webster, who is the principal at Facility Energy Solutions for over 20 years, experience in implementing energy efficiency projects. She provides technical expertise in utility program implementation, measurement and verification of savings and commercial building systems. Please take it away, Leah.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect. Thanks. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Hi, I'm Leah Webster, for those of you who don't know me, and I am here to talk about the BPA M&V protocol update. Today, we have been working on the project for about a year, starting with that cost documentation guide. And so we're going to start, this is our agenda, talk a little bit more about the project. Todd gave us a nice overview. We'll share a few more details. Then we're going to look at the M&V selection guide, which did have a heavy lift in terms of update on that document. So we're going to go through that in some detail. We're going to talk about BPA's measurement and verification library, what is included in the library, and how the hierarchy works as it is conveyed in the M&V selection guide. We're going to go through the updated M&V selection flowchart that was modified as a part of this project. And then we'll spend the rest of the time going through the individual changes that were made to the M&V documents. All right, so this project, we started off by reviewing about 30 documents, which included, of course, all of the BPA guides, many of the other BPA documents, RTF documents, and we collected feedback from BPA staff and from the program implementers on M&V issues and on the M&V protocols themselves. So we inquired about comments and ideas that the users of these protocols had for us. We ended up with So we had a pretty good reading list of evaluation documents. Those are really just the most recent ones, starting about in probably the oldest one is 2015 in this list. And we scoured these really with an eye towards the cost documentation guide, but also about measurement and verification. And what kind of feedback did we get on measurement and verification from the program evaluations themselves? There was not a lot of focus on measurement and verification necessarily directly in the evaluations, but the feedback that we did receive was that there were an awfully lot of M&V documents and that it might be beneficial to streamline these documents wherever possible. One of the strongest recommendations that did come from the evaluations was to increase the use of the engineering calculations with verification methodologies due to its cost effectiveness and and lack of degradation in quality of results. So EC with V was very popular with the evaluation teams. We also received feedback about better aligning baseline guidance in the selection guide with RTF language. The Regional Technical Forum defines all of the guidelines that work as an overarching set of protocols for the BPA guidelines and protocols. So that was an important step. The options for new construction projects were not exceedingly clear with the engineering calculations methodology was another piece of feedback. We also learned that the strategic energy management measures had moved from a 1-year measure life to an 8-year measure life, which had a direct impact on this SEM CNI M&V guide that came out in 2022. And then we needed to update the guides to align with BPA's own portfolio of documents and also to align with the new IPMVP, which was updated in 2022. And the M&V options of A and B were somewhat modified in terms of what those requirements were for measurements and minimum thresholds. So with taking this feedback to heart, these are really kind of the key action items that were incorporated into the project. We decreased the number of BPA M&V guides by 2. We integrated the indexing guide into verification by meter-based modeling protocol. That was a standalone document, which is a subset of the meter-based modeling protocol approach. So we've combined those 2 documents. And you'll notice here that the name of the meter-based modeling protocol now includes that meter-based part. There were a lot of people who found just calling it modeling that it was not clear that this was an empirical approach using meter-based energy data. So we did change the name of that protocol. So then the other one that we integrated into one of the existing primary protocols was the absent baseline approach, which was also a standalone guide, which was a subset of the equipment or in-use metering protocol. So you'll find that these 2 documents are missing from the portfolio, but they are integrated into these 2 main protocols. The other documents, we did do a heavy lift on the M&V selection guide, as I mentioned already, and we'll be looking at that next. And then we did make a variety of minor updates to all 10 of the remaining M&V documents. All right, so we'll look at the M&V selection guide. So for those of you who are not number of documents that you need to review to a minimum. So it provides general guidance on M&V. It discusses the types of baselines and under what circumstances those baselines would be used. It has a selection flowchart and a section that accompanies the flowchart that walks you through each one of the questions that is posed in the flowchart to help direct you to selecting the appropriate M&V protocol for a specific project. There are a few examples of protocol selection, and then there's also an M&V plan, an example M&V plan that shows some of the key elements that are expected when planning for M&V. So, okay, let's start off by looking at the documents. So BPA has 3 categories of M&V documents. We have the main M&V protocols, which are the highest in the hierarchy. Those contain all of BPA's M&V approaches and methods. Then we have application guides and reference guides, and these are supporting documents to the M&V protocols. So let's just walk through these and take a look. So we'll start with the M&V protocols. So we have 3 M&V protocols. We have verification by equipment or in-use metering, and we have verification by meter-based energy modeling, the new name, and we have energy calculations with verification. And each of these are unique and have unique methodologies that are presented. So the methods here, and we'll put these up. I know the names of the documents can sometimes start to start to swim around in your eyes. So the verification with equipment or in-use metering uses energy measurements and data collection at the equipment or in-use level. So very directly measuring at the equipment what's going on before and after the retrofit or the project. The verification by meter-based energy modeling, on the other hand, creates mathematical models of energy and independent data, such as weather data, before and after the retrofit or before, and compares to measured energy use afterwards, typically at the whole building level or at a meter level. And then finally, there's engineering calculations with verification, which uses engineering calculations developed from system level data. These could be engineering spreadsheet calculations. These could be physics simulation software models. So these are our three large main approaches that are available to us in the BPA portfolio. And as I mentioned a moment ago, we have integrated into these documents. So the end-use metering absent baseline measurement application guide is now a part of the equipment or end-use metering protocol. And similarly, the verification by energy use indexing protocol is now a part of the meter-based energy modeling protocol. Hopefully that simplifies the library somewhat and helps everyone understand where those methodologies fit in. All right, so here's our protocols. Now underneath the protocols, there are reference guides and application guides. So we have three of these, you'll notice, fall directly underneath verification by meter-based energy modeling. So we have the M&V regression reference guide, which is a super reference guide for regression modeling. We have the existing building commissioning protocol application guide. And I think we may have changed the name to that simply to application guide. And then we have the C&I SIM M&V reference guide. And all three of these are specific applications of the meter-based modeling. So you'll use C&I strategic management guide when you're doing a SIM project. You would use the existing building commissioning protocol when you're doing an existing building commissioning guide, and you would use the regression reference guide all the time because it's a fantastic technical guide. So hopefully that is helpful. And then we have three additional guides. And these other three guides do not clearly fit in under any single M&V protocol. These can be used with most all of the protocols. So we have estimating peak demand impacts application guide, and that can be used regardless of which protocol you're falling under. If you need to estimate peak demand impacts, this is your application guide for that. We have a sampling guide. So if for some reason you're sampling equipment rather than verifying all installations, then a sampling guide that is oftentimes used under verification by meter-based energy modeling and could be considered for energy calculations as well. And then you have your glossary for M&V. So which contains, we've really looked to that to be a repository of all of our terms so that regardless of which document you're working in, you should be able to go to the glossary and to find specifically, the term that you're looking for. It's important as we go through these M&V protocols to remember that measurement and verification there's usually multiple options available on a project for moving forward on measurement and verification. The M&V practitioner will have different experiences and backgrounds. Projects will have different measured data and data available and circumstances that may or may not limit what you can measure. Certain M&V methods require expertise. If you want to do a simulation model engineering calculation, that's a very specific skill that you need to have on your team in order to pursue that. So, and then there's variations in the level of uncertainty and accuracy in the approaches and how long it will take and how much it will cost. So there's a lot of considerations moving forward with measurement and verification besides just the really straightforward technical stuff that we like to talk about in the protocols. So just keeping that in mind, that this is a flexible context that really requires a lot of engineering judgment and is oftentimes not quite as cut and dried as you might want it to be. Okay, that said, BPA does have some hard and fast specific rules and requirements and expectations for how the measurement and verification will be done. And the first element of that is what kind of project do you have? We've delineated this, and these are, I believe these are from the Regional Technical Forum. These terms are also used in the cost documentation guide. So we have retrofit early retirement. If that existing equipment is still working and can, or it has potential to still work for another year or so, and that's a voluntary replacement project, early retirement. Whereas a retrofit replace on burnout, that is when equipment is failing or has failed, and it is more or less a mandatory replacement because the service life of the equipment has ended. And then the final category is the new construction major renovation, which includes new construction or projects that are expanding, and they may also include electrification projects. So these are the categories that the Bonneville Power likes to see things fold into, and this will determine what kind of baseline the project is expected to use. So if you have an early retirement or early replacement project where the equipment is in working order or with repairs, the equipment could continue to work and have useful life, then you are going to use an existing conditions baseline. That means the in situ as found conditions on the site is going to be what is the basis for the energy savings. Now, if you have a replace on burnout, so you have failing equipment or failed equipment, or if you have a new construction or a major renovation project where the equipment is at or near the end of its useful life, or you have new construction with expanded or renovated facilities, then you're expected to use a code baseline for the conditions to compare the new installation's energy use to. This may be if there is no applicable code that falls under the category of the project, then we would use a standard industry practice. And standard industry practice is the equivalent to a code minimum. And that's discussed in great detail in the new M&V selection guide. We've updated, you might recognize this diagram. It is directly from the selection guide, and you'll notice that it has been updated and is quite a bit different, although it gets you to the same place as the previous diagram. So if we complete our table, so going back to the type of project that we have, We now see for retrofit early retirement, we have existing conditions baseline. And in the case of a replace on burnout or of a new construction project, we're going to be using code requirements or where code doesn't apply, the standard industry practice. All right, so this is the new M&V protocol selection guide. This was updated. We have reduced the number of guides, and we also have added a new strategic energy management guide. And we added in also consideration for new construction projects, which had not been called out previously. So the flow chart is largely the same. If you are familiar with the chart already, it still starts at the top. You'll see you have a unit energy savings or standard protocol section at the very beginning. So if you have a unit energy savings or UES measure, we want you to use the UES standard savings, or if it's a standard measure that it's a simplified calculation, then we want you to use the standard calculation protocols, regardless of the kind of project. So even if it's a sim project or another or part of a custom project, if elements of a project fall into these categories, these are applicable to those portions of the project still. So as you move out of this category, you move to the custom protocols, which do not require pre and post measurement. And then the very bottom section are the custom protocols, which require both pre and post energy measurements. These are fully IPMVP adherent approaches that are called for under some circumstances. So we're going to take a look a little bit more closely and walk through this new flowchart so that you can see these elements. Okay, so we're coming in on the upper left of the flowchart here. So we've decided we don't have a unit energy savings or standard protocol measure. And the first question it asks is if you're going to use, if you have a new construction project. And if you have a new construction project, it points you to the engineering calculations protocol, if that's reasonable. And if that is reasonable, you have basically the energy calculations with verifications protocol, the simulation for new construction section of that protocol would be where you would be directed. If it is not appropriate to do that kind of approach, then this takes you to the end use metering protocol. And so that's for a new construction. And if you don't have a new construction project, it asks you, what is the level of your expected savings? And you'll notice this is probably the biggest change to the flowchart right here is in this box, that it is now 400,000 kilowatt hours per year, as opposed to 200,000 kilowatts per year. So if it's a smaller project, BPA is directing you to consider an engineering protocol. Is this engineering calculation with verification protocol reasonable? And if so, to go directly to using that. Now, if you have a larger savings project, then we want to think about, is it safe to measure your energy? That includes, is it sub-metered at the meter level? Can you get those accurate energy measurements? Are the M&V costs and the M&V project duration tenable and reasonable? Now, the The cruxy question oftentimes is, can you reliably predict the energy savings using engineering calculations? And if that is not the case, then it takes you to a pre-post measurement approach, which is an IPMVP adherent and is going to be a more accurate approach typically than an engineering calculations approach. But if it is a reasonable approach, go ahead and consider it. And there are going to be cases, BPA recognizes that there will be cases where this hard cutoff based on expected savings may not apply, and there will be other considerations and reasons why engineering calculations may be appropriate. They do want to be involved in that decision and provide their approval. You'll also notice here on the far right-hand side, we have an optional methodology that can be used in parallel or instead of the energy calculations with verification, and that's the meter-based energy modeling protocol. And oftentimes this is the least amount of work. If you have the energy data, if it's a well-correlated situation with weather and very predictable operations, sometimes this is the M&V methodology that is the least amount of work. So this is the middle part of the flowchart that's really taking you either to using the energy calculations with verification or driving you down to the bottom of the flowchart, which is here the pre-post energy measurement. You'll see the methodologies that are proposed in this portion of the flowchart require pre and post project measurements. So the first question, you'll be coming in off the top arrow here from the middle portion of the flow chart is this a strategic energy management project? This is also a new element in the flow chart now that we have a strategic energy management guide to use. So that sends you right to using the CNI SIM reference guide, which of course is an energy meter-based energy modeling methodology. If it's not a SIM guide, it asks you a series of questions here, including are savings high related to the baseline energy? Do you have meter data available? Do you have strong correlation with independent variables such as weather or other continuous variable? And is your model uncertainty pretty low in compared to the level of savings that you expect? So this is really driving you to use a meter-based energy modeling protocol if all of these things are true, and otherwise is pushing you towards selecting an in-use metering protocol and taking those energy measurements at the equipment level. There may be other reasons that are not captured here for wanting to select the end-use metering protocol. For example, if you have existing power metering and monitoring in place, things of that sort can certainly drive a decision that's not shown here. But this is an overview of the new flowchart. So we do have an example, and this example is in the selection guide. It's an example boiler replacement. And this is an antiquated diesel steam boiler that is due that is being selected to be replaced with an electric system. They are also going to replace a domestic hot water heater with a heat pump water heater. They have daily energy data available they have both their diesel fuel on a daily consumption and their electric consumption on a daily basis. And they've decided to change system types. They're going to new electric heat pumps and using the existing hot water in their systems. So the savings are relatively medium at expected to be about $100,000 kilowatt hours per year. So if we come in, let's see, so here's our example. Let's see, I think the first thing we would do is we want to eliminate the UES and the standard protocol. There is the antiquated steam boiler, understanding how that steam boiler actually performs is very much a mystery. And so developing engineering calculations regarding how that diesel boiler operates was deemed really untenable. So if you come down here, our expected savings are less than 400,000 kilowatt hours. So we'll come over and we'll say, well, okay, is EC with V a reasonable choice? And we're going to say no, it's not. And if you come down here, you'll see you cannot reliably predict savings using engineering calculations. So instead, we come down to the bottom part of the chart here, and we're going to need to use energy data. It's not a sim program. We have a high level of savings, and we are sub-metered, and we are dependent on weather. And so we can make a good model. So we're looking at using the meter-based energy modeling protocol for this particular retrofit. Having engineering calculations that are unreliable, really can be a shot in the dark. So it's much better to have a grounded calculation based on the actual fuel use and the weather at this particular location in this case. So you can see here it's how it's traced out here. So as I went to a no, it drove me to the bottom to use a pre and post measurement approach. Excitement with flowcharts. Okay. Well, that's the new flowchart. So hopefully that's all makes sense. And of course, if you guys see anything that's in any of these documents, we certainly want to hear about it. And we'll have some contact information for you at the end here. So now let's take a look at the updates that were made to each one of these documents. So I've already looked at the M&V protocol selection guide and example plan, which I show here as an overlay over the top of all of these documents, because it is meant to be a guide and a roadmap to those. And then we have the protocols, and then the application guides and reference guides. So we'll start with the protocols and just look at the major changes that were made. So verification by equipment or in-use metering protocol is the first one. And this approach generally determines energy savings from direct measurements at the equipment or system level. You can use spot or ongoing measurements along with measuring of operational parameters such as flow rates or other operating parameters. With the direct measurements used by this protocol, safety procedures are paramount in making sure that this is safely applied. The method uses a retrofit isolation approach of option A or option B, which is the IPMVP retrofit isolation methods. Option A being less rigorous than option B. So there are a range of approaches that are allowable, and that was highlighted and is highlighted in the document, and as well as it's your ability to use an option A method or an option B method, depending on the need for rigor and your specific project circumstances. So the biggest change to the equipment or in-use metering protocol was to integrate the absent baseline measurement application guide into that. And for those of you who are not familiar with the absent baseline measurement guide, this is to be used when you can't measure the baseline conditions for some reason or missing the baseline data, or in a new construction or new process that you want to use the equipment or in-use metering level approach on. And so in this case, rather than having energy measurements, baseline energy use is estimated based on what the minimum code requirements or standard energy practice alternative installation would have been. So that is the major change. The other thing we did to the verification by equipment in use metering protocol, we added or updated a few of the resources for regional energy codes. You know, where it's great, we tell you to use code, a code baseline, but we're not more specific than that. You know, codes and regions and applicability vary. So we provided some regional codes to help that become more clear what would apply. So things like the Washington Energy Code and the Oregon state codes are all listed there now. We highlighted that flexible levels of rigor and what the differences would be in your approach, whether or not you were using some stipulations or you were measuring everything like you would see in an option B requirement. And we also updated just a handful of variety things. We moved some content and clarified some items, found a typo in one of the equations that was a little bit surprised, but so those are the big changes for the end use metering protocol. So the next one is the meter-based energy modeling protocol. And this method utilizes a whole building approach and uses meter-based energy data and usually weather data or another independent variable to create mathematical model or models of the building before and potentially after a retrofit, or you will compare your predicted energy use to your actual energy use afterwards to determine your savings. This approach determines energy savings from direct measurements of power and energy consumption at the building level, along with the driving variables. And this is the method that you'll hear about. If you hear about folks talking about advanced M&V, they're talking about meter-based energy modeling methods, usually with some kind of a software tool and potentially some automated access to a data feed. Like the energy data, for example. Well, the biggest change here, again, I think it's a toss-up between the name change to meter-based, which was fairly significant, and I think there's a lot of voting that went around, and ultimately, you know, BPA picked one. So this is what we have. I think it's good. Certainly I've adapted to it and like it quite a bit more now. But we also integrated that energy indexing application guide. And this is for those of you who haven't used the energy indexing application guide, it's now in the modeling protocol. So you'll see it there. And it's a simplified subset of using the modeling protocol when the model is linear and can be used as an index and generally goes towards zero or has a range of values that are valid. This allows you to index so that you can say, you know, kilowatt hours per widget, for example, and it's very easy way to create a metric regarding the energy efficiency of a specific process or location. We did do a few other updates to this modeling guide. We updated the section on advanced M&V as that is a moving target, and that section was a little antiquated. And we also simplified the uncertainty section in this guide by removing some uncertainty tables that were intermediary and really not that helpful. The sim guide. So I've stuck the sim guide in here with the modeling protocol because it did get a couple of significant updates. Even though it's pretty much brand new, you know, we released this in 2022. There were a few changes to make. One of the things that we did, we have some very clear criteria in there for model fit and model acceptance and using the fractional savings uncertainty criteria. And everywhere else in BPA and in ASHRAE, this 50%, no more than 50% uncertainty at a 68% confidence level is used everywhere else. And so we just went ahead and switched it out. It wasn't a salient change in terms of actually what the cutoff was. It was just a different way to express it that people are more accustomed to. We updated the glossary in the sim guide. The sim guide had a number of items that were duplicated in the glossary for M&V. And so we really are relying on the glossary for M&V for our primary source of definitions, but we clean that up a little bit. But probably the biggest change for SIM is related to the measure life. When we wrote the SIM guide, the measure life was really just being considered as 1 year. And the most recent evaluation that came out with BPA has had BPA update that to an 8-year measure life. So we've updated our examples in the SIM guide to reflect that. So I think that's good news. Then now the other M&V protocol update. This last protocol, of course, is the engineering calculations with verification. And this uses engineering calculations that estimate energy use of systems and equipment and does not require energy measurements. This is not an IPMVP adherent approach, but you can use spreadsheet calculations such as hourly or bin weather calculations, or you can use a simulation model of building, a simulation model of a whole building or a system. Either one of these are engineering calculations. They have separate sections in the document because they are quite different. Using the simulation software is quite a specific skill set. So that is an important consideration when selecting this method, but it is definitely a preferred method for new construction. The way that the new construction simulation section is written, it does not require that the building simulation be calibrated to measured energy data, which makes it not adherent to IPMVP. But we did clarify in this publication that for larger projects, using a calibrated simulation certainly is best practice and should be considered for larger projects. In all of the cases with the engineering calculations with verification, as well as with all of the other methodologies, verification is required to corroborate the measure installation and operations and to confirm the engineering calculations, although monitoring is not required over time. So on this one, as we've already seen in the flowchart, we increased that threshold for using the engineering calculation methods from 200,000 kilowatt hours a year to 400,000 kilowatt hours a year. You know, the decrease in efficacy of the savings calculations was just not found to be significant when compared with the administration and other costs of burden for doing the measurement and verification. We've added this allowance for calibrated simulations. And then the other thing that we've added in there, which I was very pleased to see, is the TMYX data. TMYX data is a newer data set that is available that includes more data extremes and has a little bit better irradiance data than the TMY3 data, which is a little bit older. And so the use of the data is not prescribed, but we did provide a reference there for folks to use it if they would like. All right, and those are all of our M&V documents, and those are all of the major updates. I know we didn't look at every single guide, but every single guide didn't get anything all that exciting. But we like to keep everybody in step, so we do update them all in a batch. And so I hope that you guys find these useful. They're great resources, and they are all of the new ones are not yet posted, but they will be soon. And this is our website link for the Measurement and Verification Library at BPA, and you'll find all of the documents that we looked at today there. We don't have the new ones posted yet, but pretty much any minute.
Yes.
We're going to get them up there. So